I feel very Rory Gilmore today in this really long cable knit jumper. I feel like this is Rory Gilmore going to college vibes. It's also, I have no clothes that fit me properly and I need to actually buy maternity clothes now, but I don't want to, and I'm trying to make my normal clothes last as long as possible vibes. Anyway, I hope you're doing really well. I started my morning with getting the flu jab, which this is the first time I've ever gotten the flu jab, and my arm is already aching. I feel like it shouldn't ache this soon after having an injection. It's only been like 3 hours, but I'm already feeling achy. So that's not great because I have loads of painting to do this weekend. We are renovating our main bedroom, which is going to be our bedroom, but also all of my books are going to be going upstairs into that room. So it's going to have my library and reading corner in there, mostly because I don't want to keep my books downstairs in the living room for when baby comes, just because I don't feel like it's the safest thing to have all of my books downstairs with a baby. I know you can get the doors to go on the Billy bookshelves because I have the white Billy bookshelves, but I just don't like the idea of putting doors on my bookshelves. But also I like the idea of having them all upstairs because the bedroom is such a big room and it just gives me a nice bright space for doing filming and that sort of thing. And there's also going to be, I'm also going to set up my desk in there, so I'm going to have a little writing area as well for the first time, which will be so nice to actually have a computer set up in a specific space with all of my things and all of my writing stuff. It would just be so good. This is a really long way of saying that I got the flu jab this morning. So in today's video I wanted to talk about the books that I read in September, and I have 6 books to talk about. 2 of them are DNFs. One of those books is a permanent DNF. I just am not going to read it, and the other one is just a temporary DNF, so I'm just putting it down for now. So I think I'll talk about those 2 books first, and then I'll talk about the 4 that I did read in the month of September and actually finished. So the first book that is a temporary DNF, I'm putting it down for a little while, but not necessarily forever, and that is The House on the Strand by Daphne du Maurier. I've been reading this book for a few months, and actually I don't even know if I have a bookmark in here. Yes, well, I have a post-it note. As you can see, I haven't gotten that far through, but maybe a third of the way through. And I really struggled to completely stop reading a book and put it down. I am a completer finisher. I like to finish whatever I start. And I love Daphne du Maurier. I've really enjoyed every book of Daphne du Maurier's that I've read. This is the first one that I have not really enjoyed. So this is a sci-fi kind of book, speculative fiction maybe. It reminds me quite a bit of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's that kind of sci-fi. And we follow a man who, his friend is kind of always coming up with these weird experiments and discoveries, and he uses our main character a little bit as his guinea pig and always sort of tests things on him. And he kind of knows that this is not the best friendship, but he's also really interested in the discoveries that his friend is finding. And his friend has created this sort of tonic that when you drink it, you travel back in time. I think for me, time travel books are just not enjoyable to me. I think because I like to really delve into a storyline, and actually what happens in time travel books is you just get too many storylines going on. And I think that was my issue with this book, that I really enjoyed the parts of the story that were about the man going to the house and the kind of dynamic of his friendship and what pressures that was putting on his marriage and his children, and that part of the story I found really interesting and enjoyable. But the actual travelling back in time and observing these people from the past part of the story, I was just getting so lost and a bit bored. And so after, I think I got probably 115 pages through, and I just put the book down one day and I just decided, that's it. I'm not going to carry on with this book right now. I'm not enjoying it, and as sad as that is, I will hopefully one day be in the mood for this kind of book again, but just not for now. And then the book that I have DNF'd completely, I don't ever think I'm going to probably pick this book up again, is Foul Lady Fortune by Chloe Gong. And I picked this book up on a whim at Waterstones in a reading vlog I did a few months ago, and I wanted to just go to a bookshop and pick a book that I didn't know anything about, didn't do any research into, and just read it. And I mean, there's a couple of issues here. First one is that I didn't realise that this was the first book in a companion series to another series. The author says you can read this book without having read those other books, but I still feel like I'm missing out when I'm reading this book. I feel like there's stuff that I would be enjoying more and understanding more if I'd had a bit more background into this character from the previous books. And also, I just feel like this is not my kind of book. I feel like this is why I don't go into a bookshop and buy a book on a whim. This is why I research the books that I read and read reviews and just really try and understand whether I'm going to like a book before I buy it, because I don't know why, I'm just not enjoying it. And I got 99 pages, so again about 100, and it's quite a big book, and I don't see myself pushing through it. I'm not enjoying it enough. It's a assassin spy kind of book in a fantasy version of Shanghai, and I'm sure it's good. I just don't think it's for me. So on to the books that I actually did finish this month. I had a really good reading month. I read such a good selection of books. I feel like it was very September-y. So I'm excited to talk about all of these books. The first one that I finished was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross, and this was a book I buddy read with my friend, and it was such a fun read. I really enjoyed this. I can definitely say that she is one of my favourite fantasy writers at the moment. I absolutely love her writing and the worlds she creates and the mood and atmosphere of her stories she just describes so well. This book is set during a war which has sort of a similar feel to the First World War. However, this is a war between opposing gods, and we follow a young woman whose brother has gone off to fight in this war, and she has a magical wardrobe that when she types a letter, if she puts it in the wardrobe, it disappears. And so she begins to type out these letters to her brother and put them in her wardrobe and imagine that they have disappeared straight to her brother. However, one day she gets a letter back, and this letter is not from her brother but from another boy, and it's just such a good story. And it's one of those situations where one of the people writing the letters knows who the other person is, but the other person doesn't know who the other person is, but you as the reader know. And it's just so satisfying and so much fun. It has a rivals to lovers romantic interest storyline, and it was just a brilliant book, and I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I can't actually remember which of the next two books I read first. We'll go with the other fantasy book that I read in September, and that was A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. And this was one I was really excited for. It was a new release in September. This is a dark academia fantasy story, and we follow a woman who is studying architecture at university, and her whole life she has been in love with this book and the author who wrote this book. One of his books about a fairy king is just her favourite book. She knows it off by heart. It's the book that's got her through really difficult times in her life. At the beginning of this book, there is a contest that is run by the author's descendants to redesign his house, which is a crumbling, dusty old manor. And of course, our main character enters this competition and wins, and so she heads off to this really dark and creepy place to go and redesign her beloved author's home. When she gets there, of course, things are not all that they seem, and there is also a literature student residing in the house doing some other kind of research, and the two of them end up kind of joining forces for some unexpected turns. And this book was so much fun. I flew through it. I think I pretty much read it in one sitting, or maybe 2 sittings at most. I absolutely flew through it. It was so fast-paced and addictive and quick to read and just a lot of fun. It has a bit of romance and a bit of gothic creepiness and love of literature and books, and it was just a really fun and enjoyable read. The only thing that started to kind of grate on me throughout this book is just how many people are in love with our main character. I feel like she is constantly looked at in a suggestive way, or leered at, or I feel like every male gaze that is on her is portrayed in a negative way, and that was starting to grate on me a little bit by the end. There is a bit of a reason for it by the end of the book, but I just found it a little bit annoying to read at times. I do feel like the ending could have taken a little bit longer. It feels like there's a big build up to something that perhaps it didn't kind of unravel and play out in as satisfying of a way as I hoped for. But regardless, I really enjoyed this book, and I think I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read is one I did a whole reading vlog on, which you can watch. I'll link it somewhere on the screen. And that is Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. As I did a whole reading vlog, I won't fully go into all of my thoughts here. But I enjoyed this book, but I didn't love it. I feel like I understand why it's so many people's favourite book, but I also understand why so many people really don't like this book. It was a really difficult one to get through and read, not in terms of the pacing of the story or the story itself. It's more just that the themes and the content of the book are really hard to read and quite depressing throughout, that it made it quite a hard read for me to get through. So I can kind of objectively say that this was an amazing book because the writing was amazing. The themes that are conveyed in this book are really powerful and emotive. The setting is described so well. Everything about this book is great and a 5-star book, but subjectively, in terms of how I enjoyed reading it or kind of what I got from reading it, I just didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I don't know. It was a 3-star kind of read for me in terms of my reading experience, and I think generally when I rate books, I rate them based on my subjective enjoyment or experience or what I got from a book, rather than objectively, I think this is a great book. I would definitely read more of Emily Bronte's works because she is an incredible writer, but the book itself, for me, I'm glad I read it, but I don't think I'll read it again. And then after reading Wuthering Heights, I decided to pick up a cheesy, cozy murder mystery, and the book I picked up was The Murder of Mr Wickham by Claudia Gray. This is a murder mystery about all of the Jane Austen characters who come together for this kind of house party at the Knightleys' home, so Emma. Whilst they're there, Mr Wickham appears uninvited. Mr Wickham, of course, being probably one of Jane Austen's most hated characters from Pride and Prejudice, and he appears uninvited. That following night, he is found murdered in the house. And so all of these Jane Austen characters, the main protagonists from all of the books, are trapped together in this house, and they kind of can't leave until the investigator has worked out which of them did the murder. I think that as long as you've got one or two Jane Austen stories under your belt, then you can enjoy this book, because the author does a really good job of delving a bit into what happens in the books without spoiling anything, but kind of giving you an idea of, you know, their stories from those books. But I think if you've read at least one or two Jane Austen books, then you will appreciate this book more, of course, because you are following the characters from those beloved stories. We're particularly following Elizabeth and Mr Darcy's son, and the Tilney's daughter from Sense and Sensibility, I think. And they are both of marriageable age, and they're the two youngest people at this house party, and they kind of join forces to work out who is the murderer. And it's a lot about their friendship, as much as it is about those beloved Jane Austen characters. I would say that where this book fell a bit flat for me was in just how many characters' perspectives we were following. We were literally following every protagonist and their spouse, plus these two children, plus Mr Wickham. I mean, we had so many characters and perspectives that it wasn't that it was hard to follow, it just felt like as a result there was a bit of depth that was lacking from the story. And, you know, on the one hand, it's a cozy murder mystery, so it's not supposed to be that deep. But I just feel like I would have appreciated if the story had perhaps focused on Jonathan Darcy and Juliet Tilney. I think they're the two younger characters. If it had been just from their perspective, and then we'd maybe got a bit of an insight into our favourite characters. I just feel like it tried to tackle too many angles and way too many themes and topics, and just a lot of things all in one 400-page book. So I think that for me lessened the enjoyment slightly. I found that every time I was reading it, I was smiling and enjoying the characters and the way they interacted with each other. Overall, I think I gave this book a 3.5 stars, or maybe I don't know if it's a 3-star or a 3.5 star. I think maybe a 3-star, just because I did nearly put it down. And it tried to tackle a bit too much. But if you are a Jane Austen fan and you're looking for a cozy book, I would really recommend it. It was really fun, really cozy, and such a fun way of revisiting the Jane Austen world. I actually finished that book on like the 2nd of October or something, but I'm including it in my September reading wrap up because I read, you know, like 90% of the book in September. So those are all the books that I read in September, and I'm feeling in the mood to actually plan out my reading a little bit for October, just because I've got such a busy month of house DIY. It's going to be a really busy few weeks, and so I feel like I want to plan out my reading a little bit so that I am a little bit more intentional about what I'm reading and trying to make sure that I do read when I can. So I'm going to go to my bookshelves and pick some books to read this month. Okay, so the first book that I am planning to read this month, I've already started, so I'll talk about this first, and that is And the Mountains Echoed by Khaled Hosseini. I have had this book on my shelves lent to me by someone for nearly a year, and it's been there waiting for me to read and give back to her. And so I finally felt in the mood to read it. I am definitely quite a mood reader, so I'd been putting this book off for ages, even though I feel like it's going to be such a good book and such a good and emotional read. I'm about 100 pages through so far and loving it. I really want to get to The Picture of Dorian Gray this month. I have had this also on my shelves for quite a few months, and I have wanted to read it for so long, and I've been saving it for a cold grey autumn day, and so I feel like October is going to be the month that I finally read The Picture of Dorian Gray. I'm also really making it through my Penguin cloth bound books that I've had or been gifted for a long time. I always feel scared to read them for some reason because they're so beautiful. But I actually really enjoy reading out of them. The pages are really thick, the books open fairly nicely. They also come with a little ribbon. I also have lots of notes and extra bits about the book in them, so I will probably read some of those extra bits too, but I'm really excited to read this one. Oh, so another book that I recently pre-ordered that had been on my anticipated reads list for this autumn is The Golden Spoon by Jessa Maxwell, and this is another cozy murder mystery type book. I feel like with cozy murder mysteries, they're never my 5-star reads. They're never my favourite books of all time, but I always come out of them feeling like I have enjoyed reading them. And so I feel like I'm going to save this one for when I just need a kind of easy book that's not going to take too much out of me, which sounds perfect for a really busy month of doing DIY stuff. This is a murder mystery that is kind of like the Great British Bake Off, and that is all I needed to know. And then I want to pick one more book because I like to have about 4 books in my reading TBR. Reading TBR, of course it's a reading TBR. TBR literally stands for to be read. But I like to have 4 books per month as my general goal, like a book a week. Actually, I know what book I'm gonna mention. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, but I'm currently, I don't know why I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm currently reading this book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzero, and me and my husband are actually reading this together, so like reading it out loud to each other. This is a, I don't know how I would describe this book, kind of about Christian discipleship and maturity and how to be emotionally healthy in your Christian walk. And so far we're both really enjoying it. I feel like it's challenging me a lot in terms of my own emotional maturity, but we're really enjoying it and getting a lot from it. We've also listened to Pete Scazzero's podcast, and he's just a really interesting guy, and I agree with a lot of what he says on church in general. So I am excited to read some more of this book. So that will be my little October stack. It might change, there might be extra books added in, I don't know, but for now these are the books that I'm going to hope to get through in October. It's quite a varied list actually, and there's no fantasy in this list, so I feel like there's definitely going to be a fantasy book. I can't really go a whole month without reading any fantasy books. So that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed hearing about the books that I've read and am planning to read over the next few weeks. Let me know what your favourite book of September was and what books you're most anticipated about reading in October. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are in this world, and I'll see you very soon with another video.